Thank you for joining us today. My name is Saurabh Madan, and I'm your host today for the next 90 minutes or so. I'm the General Manager at MoEngage for Asia Pacific markets here at MoEngage, and I feel very privileged to be hosting this session live on decoding digital banking. Banking institutions are older than any other industry I can think of that is right now going through a massive digital shift. With the usage of print money reducing in the last decade, banks are now reinventing themselves and taking all of us into a new era where we might never even have to go into a physical branch. As odd it may sound, the next generation might never even see a physical bank branch. While traditional banks embrace the digital era, they face many challenges across different business units in their organizations. Internal process change, verifying customer details, understanding customer needs without even being able to physically meet a customer, just some examples of some of the challenges banks face. Amongst all of these opportunities and challenges, one particular challenge that has stood out is the personalization and privacy challenge. Any organization trying to personalize customer experience will first need to understand customer behavior by analyzing customer data. But given that banking is probably the most regulated industry, it is a paradox for banks where they must meet privacy regulations and still be able to deliver very personalized experiences. Here at MoEngage, we have been a part of digital transformation journey supporting several banks and fintech organizations around the world. Just to name a few, Ally Bank in the US, Mashreq Bank in Middle East, CIMB Bank here in the Philippines, Indonesia, and Vietnam, and also some other fintech companies like Atomi, Credivo, Home Credit, etc. We've been very proud of supporting all of them with their transformation. As a part of the work we do with banks, we get to work with some very strong, experienced digital leaders that are helping banks reinvent themselves. And today I feel very privileged to be hosting not one, not two, not three, but 6 industry leaders who are heavily contributing to digital transformation that banks are going through. Our first session today will be with 4 digital leaders that I'm about to invite on the stage. And after the first session ends, we'll have our C-suite conversation hosted by Anna Green from Amazon, with a very special guest joining us later today, Mr. Vijay Manoharan, CEO of CIMB Philippines. So without any further delay, let me get started. Let me invite our panel members for our first session today. The conversation is centered around the personalization and privacy paradox. So our first panelist today is Mr. Nitin Bhargava joining us from here in Singapore. Nitin is the head of decision science, digital ventures by Standard Chartered Bank. Nitin, can I please invite you up on the Zoom stage, please?
Hi, good morning, everybody. Glad to be here and participating in this forum.
Thank you, Nitin. Our second panelist, Mr. Emmanuel Esguerra, Chief Marketing Officer, CIMB Bank Philippines. Emmanuel, can I please invite you on?
Hi, morning, everyone. Great to be here. Saurabh, thank you for inviting us.
Thank you for joining us, Emmanuel. Our third panelist today, I am not sure if he's been able to make it, is Lito here yet? I think Lito is running a little late, so he'll join us in a bit. Lito is Executive Vice President and Chief Innovation and Inclusion Officer for RCBC Philippines. He'll join us in a bit. So I'll go ahead and invite our fourth panelist, Khalid Raheel from Amar Bank in Jakarta. Khalid is the Chief Marketing Officer at Amar Bank. Khalid, can you please join us on?
Hello, everyone. Lovely to be here.
Thank you, Khalid. Glad to have you here. So let's get started, gents. Thank you, first of all, to all of you for joining us. We'll have Lito join us in a bit. From the banking perspective, we are seeing a lot of change going on, and all of you have probably been a part of the journey a lot of banks are going through in the digital shift. May I first start off mentioning a very recent research from Boston Consulting Group that revealed that banks can achieve 3 times revenue growth just through personalization. But scaling personalization is easier said than done, especially for banks. Nitin, if I can start off with you, please. When you started the personalization journey with digital ventures at Standard Chartered Bank, what exactly did you really start with? And just before that, Lito's joined us. Lito, good morning.
Morning. Sorry, I just came from a BSP presentation.
No problem. We were just about to get started, Lito.
Okay.
So everyone, Lito is Executive Vice President and Chief Inclusion and Innovation Officer at RCBC Bank, Philippines. Lito, thank you for joining us. I've just asked Nitin a question. I'll repeat myself just for your reference. So Nitin, going through the digital transformation journey in banks, it's a bit of a challenge. When you started the journey in your career or in your organization, where exactly did you start? What's the real first step? Over to you.
Sure, Saurabh. Saurabh, so I would always say start point is a customer. So bank need to understand their market, their customer needs, and their customer demand, and then build around that. So I will put my answer in two phases. So first one is from a customer perspective, and during the discussion we'll touch upon where should we draw a line between personalization and invasion of privacy. And if customer thinks that their banks are offering them the right offers, right product, and taking care of their needs, I see no reason why they shy away from sharing the details. So that is on a customer side. If they feel valued, they are getting the right value from their banks, and a personalized recommendations, financial advice offers, then it increases the propensity or the willingness of the customer to share the details. Now, talking on bank side, there is no silver bullet, but I would like, as I keep saying, like in my mind, it's 6 hours, and if banks get right, it is good. So starting on those right infrastructure. So given the current digital world and given most of the cloud and SaaS partnerships, do you have the right capabilities to read the real-time data, ingest those data points, and have the right insights about your clients, right analytics? So that leads towards the data scientist or the toolkits which you need to ingest that data and come out with a right offers. So that touch upon the third aspect, right offer, and that's where recommendation engines and the context plays a critical role. So in current world, there are ready to use recommendation engines. If your organization's permits and if you have a right capability, built it in-house, but that's most critical one. Fourth one, right timing. And that's where I'm alluding to bit of a real time or location based offers, because uh, again, if you are, and I'll take a simple example, uh, it's a birthday and most of the banks wishes you happy birthday, great, one level of personalization, and then they send you offers. Now bank has lots of data, so my bank knows where do I spend, what's my behavior, what's my cuisine preference, what's my normal budget. So at least before our offer being sent out, personalized up to that extent. And a simple example I keep quoting, I'm a vegetarian. Most of the time I get seafood offers. In my 12 to 15 years of transaction history, there is not a single transaction on that restaurant. So just an anecdote, but yes, the point is personalize and read from the insights. And the last two on the pricing. So may not be that relevant on the offer side, but we talk of bit complex and price sensitive products like loans and mortgages, that comes into picture. And last one I put it is on a channel. So given a current scenario where multi-channel strategies are available and banks wants to reach out across all the channels, it would always be great to understand and build again on analytics what are the preferred channels by your customers, and do a mix of all 6. So right offer for the right customer at right time at right price through the right channel, and infra obviously is supporting it in the back. With that role being played by the bank, I'm sure we will get customer confidence, and if you make the offer relevant and valuable, it would be easier to go on the personalization journey.
Got it. What you said is very insightful, and it actually is applicable to all industries. The example you gave that you are a vegetarian and you've been getting seafood offers. I think the consumer's eyebrows get raised when they get something impersonalized, and that's when they get annoyed, and that's when they start looking for an alternative. because they're not getting personalized offers. They're just getting something random. It happened to me as well. I connected to a Wi-Fi at a public hotspot many years ago in Auckland. And this particular supermarket keeps sending me emails about sewing machines, socks, and I'm never going to buy from them because I'm no longer in New Zealand, right? So as long as it's personalized, I think it keeps your audience engaged. But the moment you send something impersonalized is where the real problem starts and you start losing customer confidence. Is that right in summary, Nitin?
That's right, Saurabh. And again, like it's a journey. So I'm not saying like only get started when you have all the 6 R's in place. You built over time. But having said that, and my panelists may agree with me, banks have added advantage. The credit card is into customer hand. You can see their transactional behavior as part of onboarding. You collect the information about customer preferential choices. If you are not do that, that's very important part of the onboarding exercise. And the location, you have the address, so you very well know. And specifically in current times when most of the people are working from home and all, if you are talking of near me offers, easy to use offers, use those information to dissect the right offer for the client.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Emmanuel, CIMB Bank have gone through transformation that obviously MoEngage team has witnessed over the past 12 months. Any comments on what Nitin just shared?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with everything. One of the key points I picked up from what Nitin was saying, obviously it's a learning process, right? So for us, we're pretty new in the Philippines. I mean, CIMB was just 2 years ago, just introduced itself. And I think personalization definitely helped us to get up to over 4 million customers onboarded. Just recently, we hit that milestone. Now, my view, obviously, the fundamentals need to be there, for personalization. You have to have a brand that's strong. As we mentioned earlier, banking is all about trust, right? So, and personal information is something that we hold sacred. We have to make sure that we care for our customers' information, the data that we handle. And it's all about that, right? So the brand continues to grow, it continues to build a relationship through personalization. And we have to understand from that data exactly what the customer wants. That's how we formulate our marketing mix, our products, what we offer. By understanding their behavior, we're able to customize more relevant products for them, right? So,
Got it.
yeah. So it's all about that. So setting up the organization that understands and embraces the beauty and sacredness, if I may call it, of data, and turning that into some really useful insights. And while you're doing that, you're continuously learning and reading how customers are responding to what you're churning out, what you're offering. And then eventually you'll get into to the right balance of things without having to breach any protocols or rules about data privacy. So
Absolutely.
I think branding is important. Trust is very important and sacred.
A quick follow-up question there, Emmanuel, for you specifically. So CIMB Philippines, 2 years in the market, probably a fresh launch, easy to get internal alignment on what needs to be done to launch our digital practice. For an organization that, a banking organization, which has probably been around for 100 years and they've got internal process, this organizational change and structure is obviously a very tough task. How do you get internal alignment when you're starting a digital transformation journey? Obviously sticking to, let's say, marketing practice. What kind of changes do you need to go through internally to get the alignment?
Well, I think it's all about working across departments and teams, right? So marketing being almost like at the center of it, because we are also leading and understanding, getting customer insights. We have to make sure that we're always constantly looking at the same data and reading it and understanding altogether what it means, what are the consequences, what are the actionable points. So we do have this almost, I think when we were starting, we were doing workshops, looking at data, staring at how people are behaving, as we were growing the numbers, looking at the transactions, we were seeing also testing a lot. So we had to work closely with data science, data management. We had to work with products in developing these new innovations that we would introduce. And customer care is also quite important for us in CIMB. So obviously nothing is perfect at the beginning, but if what we're projecting and we have the whole organization embrace that we do have to bring in the best for our customers through data, through personalization, I think it'll all work out.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, I'm gonna go to Lito. I was just making my final notes last night, and obviously I read this 2 weeks ago, Lito. Very recent news, RCBC planned to set up a digital banking arm after securing some fresh funding from Japan's SMBC. Tell us more about what's RCBC planning to do? What kind of added pressure do you think banks are facing to focus on customer engagement via digital channels?
Well, I think to sum up my my response to you, I mean, this is indeed very exciting. We are indeed in a very exciting times, no? And despite the pandemic, we have seen the growing appetite of investors to really fund more digital banking initiatives, and we welcome this as a major development in the Philippines, given the fact that in the ASEAN region we have seen the proliferation of the influx of the licensing regime for digital banks. And of course, in my assessment, for example, in the Philippines, we are looking at around, my guesstimate would be around 8 licenses to be given before end of the year. And just imagine the new entrants that are practically pouring back with fresh capital infusion. And of course, on top of that would be the local players who would further intensify the competition. I mean, of course, at the end of the day, the bottom line would be, the empowerment of the consumers. For RCBC, I mean, that is one of those several good news that we've seen in the past couple of weeks with the infusion of fresh capital coming from SMBC, from Sumitomo, which is the second biggest lender in Japan. And of course, there will be exciting, and we have programmed a number of initiatives. This is aside from, of course, keeping up the banking services in terms of having to capture a sizable chunk of the population so far as our financial inclusion is concerned, as far as having to serve both the mass affluent and the mass market segments, because you said it, that of course part of that initiative is having to also go through the process of acquiring a digital bank license. And in fact, even without a digital bank license, we are actually doing it right now, right? In fact, we just celebrated our first anniversary for Discartec, which is the Philippines' first and only financial inclusion super app. And with this, in barely a year, we have seen a 388% growth rate, quarter on quarter in terms of usage growth. So, and having to have more than 4 million app downloads and 2.3 million registered users just for the mass market app, which is Discartec, we have seen the tremendous adoption of Filipinos to go digital. And I think if there is any good that this pandemic brought about, is I think the further acceleration of digitalization. That's why it is something that we would want to really push forward. And I think this is something that even my colleagues here in this panel would agree that the present, the now and the future will hinge on digital.
So a lot of these new users would be ones who never had a banking account. So this is the first time they're banking, which is great, because this will change their lives now that they have access to banking. Khalid, Indonesia is another big market where we've had a lot of unbanked consumers back in the day, and with digital banking now taking strong shape and new licenses being granted, you are sitting right in the middle of probably the hottest market when it comes to digital banking. Tell us more about what's happening in Amar Bank, but the hot topic, personalization and privacy.
Right.
What level of personalization is good enough, and where does it start treading the privacy line?
I agree with what Nitin and Emmanuel actually spoke of personalization. It's a little different for us, Saurabh. We established ourselves as a fintech. We do not bring our legacy spectrum into the ecosystem. So for us, we have always been or called ourselves as we are a technology company with a banking license. It changes the perspective. It puts agility and speed at the center of our growth strategy, right? If we looked at personalization, it was very easy for us to kind of start at a point where we have everything in place, right from the data, right from the behavior, right from whatever story did, the data told us from that aspect. But what is very important that we learned in this journey is there are three things to personalization. So one is, if we are talking in perspective or talking from a banking focus. So we are talking of personalized marketing. One is that. Second is, how do we do a personalized service? So this gets totally connected to how personalized your product is, right? So for example, Amar Bank has Sonaiku, which basically disburses $200 to $2,000 as personal loan without any collaterals. So you are, for example, taking a loan for $1,000 and you've taken it 5 times, $1,000, 1,500, 1,600, 1,900. And you are my top right customer. You belong to my top right segment. The day you want 2,200, I would say, hi, Saurabh, I'm helpless. So personalization should actually, so the whole of this gamut actually is at the mercy of the product. So it all depends on how agile is your product. So that's when personalization works. Because I always say this, customer's journey, when we look at how he takes this total journey, which is a sinusoidal waveform, in a traditional perspective, if I have to put this, it is a drunken man's walk. He takes 2 steps forward, 2 backwards, 1 to the right, 1 to the left, but ultimately he knows where to go. He reaches home, right? So in this kind of a scenario, we got to be very clear of how are we taking those straddles as points of experience and basically plug in the right ways to get this customer across. So as to sum it up, it all depends on how agile is your product. Rest all will fall into place. It follows suit. And this is what we have kind of experienced at Amar Bank in the last 7 years of our establishment.
So Rob, just to because I was able to respond to your question to the other panels about personalization. Just a few take in terms of just my my take about it, in terms of how RCBC was able to push for hyper personalization, because we all know that hyper personalization is really at the core of digitalization, right? And while we are in the Philippine context for a developing market like Philippines, having to have that context of personalization, it has to be born out of having to have high-tech yet high-touch engagement with customers, because you cannot go into having to push for a utopic environment or utopic state where you can have a cashless society. There can be no cashless society, especially in a developing market like Philippines. We are actually aspiring for a coinless and cash-light economy, right? And there should be, and the transition is really evident because it is a journey towards having a cash-heavy society towards a cash-light economy, right? So I think that's why what is, for me, how I define personalization is having a high-tech engagement, high-tech digitalization push, yet high-touch engagement. Because for Filipinos, we still value the culture of having to still have someone to talk to, someone to still engage, and that is something that we are actually doing right now. Thank you.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is the physical bank branches in the Philippines won't disappear anytime soon, because it's going through that transition still, right?
It will be disappearing sooner than later. But because for example in RCBC we have close over 70 branches, because we have seen that the transition of over-the-counter transactions in branches have grown to the shift from over-the-counter transactions to digital has actually grown to as high as 280%. So it is an indicator that what we are doing in terms of cutting the number of physical branches is the way forward.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you.
And-
Nitin, you
Yes,
were
sir.
about to say something. Over to you.
Yeah, if I may just add to Lito's and Khalid's comments. So yes, markets where it's a big unbanked population and there is an opportunity to digitize, personalize, and get that share. But in addition to that, even for a heavily banked markets like Singapore and Hong Kong, and I would like to quote a Hong Kong example uh, for benefit of everybody. Like last to last year, HKMA issued 13 virtual bank licenses in already overcrowded market. But on top of that, and I was fortunate enough to be part of the MOX team and under the guidance of Dennis Govan, my CEO in MOX, before I moved over to Singapore last year, successfully launched MOX Bank last year. And though a new bank and already into a overcrowded market, if I recall, 6 or 8 months touched its 100,000 customer base. So if the solution is simple, completely digital, agile, personalized, there is always an opportunity. And I think few panelists take upon that, and that's maybe the right word. That's why they are called neo banks or challenger banks, because they're challenging the earlier or orthodox ways of banking and pushing more towards personalization and customization.
So Nitin, you've gone through that journey where you were a part of Mox Bank, the launch and the success. At what stage of the launch that you start thinking about personalizing content? Is it on day one or is it after the launch? Or do you start planning for it in the very beginning before even the launch?
So it's from very beginning, Saurabh, again, going back to my earlier point around think customer first. So though like my role in MOX was more on technical delivery, but yeah, to answer your question, it is even before, during the build phase. And that's what kind of I'm driving into Singapore now, the market which I'm operating on. But very interesting point, Saurabh, and just to give some perspective of it, again, I keep saying like you don't need the whole engine or the whole army to get ready and that's where this planning with your other squad or team members become critical. So first start point is your onboarding journey itself. Do a journey in such a way that you gather more and more information about clients, their preferentials, their choices, so that you are not going blind. And then you can start deploying your models. Then comes the second stage when they started transacting with you. Then banks have a lot more data of what are the preferences, choices, what kind of cuisines you prefer. Are you a e-commerce profile? Are you a electronics profile? Are you a grocery shopper? Are you a traveler? So that's a second angle. And and the last one I put it up, which most of us see in our day-to-day lives, Amazon or Netflix. Banks are another or the next Amazon or Netflix. So if you deploy the right tools, you are having information around, like if you present 10 deals to the client, which kind of deals they are browsing, which they are just flicking it across, and then the ones which got browsed, which are saved, and then the ones which are saved, which got redeemed. This is much more heavy data for us to learn. So the one which they are not even bothered, next run, ideally you should not be showing them. And that's where these algos like Netflix or AWS comes into picture. So yes, that should be the goal, and then it's an evolving journey. So yeah, as we learn, we implement and make it customer focused. And
Absolutely.
last one to add from my again Mog's boss. So his motto is earn heart share, market share will follow. So I think that's a key, and I would highly recommend that earning heart share, or go for the heart share of your customers.
Okay, don't go for the wallet share, go for the heart share. I'm going to use that.
Rest all are the end results. They will automatically come if you get the heart share.
Fantastic. Okay. I think Lito had to drop off. There's a question for him in chat, so we'll wait for him to come back. But thanks for that, Nitin. That makes a lot of sense for pretty much every industry. I think the learning here is don't go for wallet share, go for the heart share. If you wow your customer at every journey in their life cycle, they'll be bound to continuing being loyal to your brand. And when you get a bit impersonal and you start sending impersonalized offers to them, that's when they'll start looking for alternative brands. There's a question here. I'll throw it at all three of you to answer, please. What are your strategies in targeting clients that are technologically challenged, like the elderly, in adopting digital banking?
Can I go with it?
Emmanuel? Yes, please,
yeah,
Emmanuel.
Sure.
Oh, off to you.
Yes, it's a very interesting question. We do, I think what you need to understand in the Philippines is that there's a huge unbanked or underserved market. So what we recognized is that financial literacy is really key in moving forward with the marketing. So we actually embraced that. Wanted to make sure we have even the fundamentals of saving, taking a loan, the very basics. So what we've done was to really make this into a programmed content in our social media. We've even built some video series of how to start with digital banking. I think I'll go back to your point, Saurabh, earlier that um, at one point in time, we were hovering around 30% of our new acquisitions were first time to have a bank account in CIMB. So CIMB was their first bank account. And so we took that to mean that, we really need to go back to the very basics of banking, of managing your finances and building that. And as we also go through like sort of more complex, like I personally teach my mom on how to bank with us. So I take a lot of our conversations and put that into our content. And inspire us to do videos, how-to videos, because YouTube is quite popular, obviously, and Facebook's popular in the Philippines.
Yep.
So we try to go to the very, very, broad aspect of doing this. So I think that helps a lot, and that also, I think, to borrow the words of Nitin, heart share. As you teach them, you're also building trust. You're also building understanding around how it is to have a bank account in the Philippines with us in CIMB.
Thank you, Emmanuel. That's very insightful. Same question for you, Khalid. How do you get the elderly, technically technologically challenged people adopting digital
banking? Not just
banking?
technology, Saurabh. There are a lot of facts. So Indonesia is about 119 million underserved unbanked population. So when we, when we looked at this from a research angle, we found a very interesting insight here. So what happens is in a traditional format, while they're not into a bank or not having a savings account, there are these SES B2 C1. They actually earn by the day and they bring in $200 every day to their house, right? So maybe 200,000 Indonesian rupiah. So when we walked into their house, we found 4 jars. One said education, one said emergency, one said medical, and one said savings. So they're used to actually take out 50,000, 50,000, 50,000, and 50,000, add into those 4 jars. So what happens when they open an account? So when they open an account, this 200,000 Indonesian rupiah comes and sits together, and they fail to understand as to how do they take this forward, right? How should they be spending? How much should they be? They're very, eager to see that, okay, my emergency fund is now 1 million rupiah or $100. My education fund is now $150. So it's that, the fact that they're very comfortable to see that in that traditional format. So banking cannot. They kind of get a little confused. Hence, what we did is we launched CIMB, which is a digital-only bank on the cloud, which basically puts those 4 jars into your application, right? So one is that bit, and as I also agree with Emmanuel, it's also about financial literacy. It's not just about banks need to think that we are not just box moving our products. We need to be problem solvers. We have to come, as Nitin rightly puts it, customer first. We need to backward integrate behaviors to understand what problem are we solving. It's not just about, okay, if you need to save some money, come, look, I have a savings account. If you need a loan, come, I have a better product which gives you a loan in 5 minutes, or I have a better interest rate for your deposits. No, it's about solving a problem. Go a notch beyond, solve a problem. And that's when, the entire paradox can be solved there. And so, as I said, it's all about how we look at the product, how agile is it, how can it get backward integrated from, forward integrated to a backward integrated understanding or behavior of what's happening in people's life.
So Khalid, in that situation, did you guys do anything when you identified that elderly people will have these 4 boxes at home?
Absolutely. So we started CIMB with those 4 jars. So we gave that 4 jars separately, where they actually can save, it's called a wish list. They can save it for education. They can actually build more jars within that application. So, and end of the day, they see that clearly that, okay, whatever they're saying for say emergency funds, is the money is actually there. It's stacked into that. And it's as simple as that. So it starts with that aspect of understanding behaviors, bringing in that aspect into how your products are built, and then educate them saying how should they be going forward with it. And obviously there are a lot of videos that actually go around and say, okay, this is how you need to onboard. This is what is KYC. This is how you need to come on, start transacting, so on and so forth.
So you're not just taking a bank digital, you're taking your consumer's life digital.
Absolutely.
And their behavior in their real life into digital life by offering those jars as an example here.
Absolutely. Right? In the evolution of this whole era of digitization, we as brands have the opportunity not just to position the brands in the minds of the customer. We have an opportunity to position the brand in the life of the customer. That's how we should look at it.
Makes a lot of sense. Emmanuel, probably similar behaviors in the Philippines?
Yeah, no, definitely we're at the cusp. I think we're very similar to Indonesia. It's really people getting on board in the digital train, but it's not that easy. I mean, from the numbers per se, it looks quite quick, and adoption is happening, but it's really inch by inch, person to person. I wanted to mention earlier, like we did also launch that video series, and we call it Digital Banking with CIMB. And it was amazing because the minute we launched it, our views and our subscribers grew so quickly. And that gives you a picture of how much people want to understand, to get an understanding, to adopt themselves and to learn for themselves. We also try to, I think the question was, what are your other strategies, right? I'll really go back to consumer understanding. We have monthly panels, surveys. So we ask them really critical questions about why they would want to take a loan. What are the reasons why? These are surveys where people opt in, and we get the numbers and get the trends. What their experiences with digital banking, and all the insights and observations that we get out of those, we build it into new offers or new Finlit articles or videos or content that we churn out.
Okay, thank you. There's a question here. I'll just read it out for you. It's related to CIMB Bank, so you may or choose not to answer depending on how confidential this information needs to say. There's a person named Angelica Torres. Angelica's question is, how is CIMB's journey with Gcash? Did strategic partnership with other fintech players also key to boosting outreach and saving sources?
So far, so good. I mean, Gcash has been a really good partner for us. Together, we're embracing together the mission of building financial inclusion in the country. So from my perspective, we both have and embrace the same values and mission. And I think we're working closely together with the various teams. So there are many teams that are involved together in this partnership. But yes, definitely something that is very much part of our strategy. So for CIMB, it's not really about getting people to open our app every day and look at it and consider it to be like an everyday app. It is not. I mean, we're very much aware of that. But people open their wallets every day, and we're connected to that. And CIMB is available within that Gcash wallet. I think we're already doing our jobs, right? So offering banking within something that they use in their everyday lives is something that it's a bit different in the way we do things, but to us, it's really creating and being part of that ecosystem that is relevant to our customers.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Lito, thank you for joining back. There was a question from somebody in the audience for you, and I saved it, hoping that you would join back.
Yeah.
Calvin Carlos is asking to Sir Lito, how would you entice people, especially here in the Philippines, to use digital or mobile banking more? What are your plans in order to do so? What restricts the Philippines from going purely digital by 2023? rather than being cash light?
Okay, so thank you for that question. I think we all know that in the Philippines now we are very lucky to have a very dynamic and progressive regulator, no, in the name in the entity called the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, and we are one with the BSP insofar as having to achieve that twin goals of having to convert at least 50% of financial transactions to digital and that 70% of adult Filipinos to be part of the formal financial system. But back to your question as to how we will now be able to entice more Filipinos, especially in the rural areas, to be able to avail of the digital services, right? Because if you are to look at the profile of the customers of Discartech, for example, which is our inclusion super app, after a year from the time that we launched it, we have seen that over 70% of our subscriber base would be those people who are living in rural areas, and that 65% would be women, and that 8 out of 10 transactions are actually done outside Metro Manila or actually in the provinces. So the thing here is that one key factor for you to be able to really push for digitalization is digital education, financial education and digital literacy. So we have massive efforts to ensure that we communicate to the public in various channels, may it be social media, may it be alternative channels. For example, we have the first financial education collaboration with Viber, first for Viber to have this collaboration with the Universal Local Bank of the Philippines to push digital education, right? And of course, aside from that, we have come up with what we call a digital coffee table book that is more meant for financial literacy in partnership with the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Trade and Industry in the Philippines. So the whole gamut of all of these initiatives is really meant to ensure that every Filipino at the grassroots level will now be able to understand what are the banking jargons that are normally in English would be translated in the everyday language such as Tagalog, or also we launched another feature which is the Cebuano dialect, because one of the barriers to entry really is communication. Language is one of the barriers, so that's why we are the first in the market to offer 2 dialects in the mobile app.
Personalization is not just the offers. Personalization is much deeper, and language is one example. We've got 5 more minutes for me to wrap up our session. There's a couple of questions. Nitin, I'm going to ask you this question because you may have this up your alley. Any experiences among the small and medium enterprise segment of banks in relation to digitalization? This is from Munira Aziz.
Yeah, sure. So again, my short answer would be, and thanks to the Standard Chartered background, in Standard Chartered, SME is counted as part of the retail segment itself rather than corporate banking. So my view is, and even more than retail client, SME is in more need of it. The kind of needs they have are no different from an individual, but they need it more timely. So yes, SME is on the agenda. For us as well, and for the other emerging new banks in the market. Having said that, on the need side, if I consider a SME owner versus a retail investor, the needs are on money management, cash flows, ease of payment, reaching out to your creditors/debtors, more timely MIS and insights into your portfolio. So all the needs, until and unless if you pointed out to me, are more or less of an individual, but at an advanced level. So to my earlier points on 6 R's, what I defined, and if bank is building around that and taking those analytics to the top level, I think we have a ready SME solution. To talk about few features, so this cash flow management or event triggers is one critical part, which may be clubbed under personal financial management category. Secondly, with open banking, at least in markets like Singapore and Hong Kong, where through customer consent you can get the entire holdings of a customer, is a very important feature which most banks should leverage on. And again, goes back to the same example of trust, that if customer sees a value in it, why not it will share. And if you can go back to your SME client with his full banking portfolio and not one single bank, and including his debtors and creditors, and insights around how does your cash flow looks like, and you might be running short if this is a flow, or these are the vintages of where the money is lying. I think these are the few basic pulls which should be considered for SME. And not to forget on SME lending. So again, with bureau and with a kind of uh, open banking and overall situation available, if banks can work on alternate credit scoring models in addition to the bureau scores, that's another point to score, which goes again towards personalization. So bureau just give you a bureau score, again amazing piece of information, and that's what all bank credit decision on it. But if you can do more with the data, with the alternate cycle, which industry he operates in, what kind of client base is, and price it at a customer level rather than at a cluster level, would be a differentiator as well.
Thank you, Nitin. That makes a lot of sense. I'll ask one last question before we move on to our next session today. The question specifically in chat for Khalid from Amar Bank. This is a person named Dedi Sinuhaji to Khalid, Amar Bank. How do you onboard new customers during pandemic? Do Amar Bank use eKYC for verifying customers?
So be it pandemic, be it pre-pandemic or post-pandemic, we are purpose-built to actually take customers on board completely, digital closed loop, right? So we did see a lot of surge of how 2020 has changed the entire adaptation to the, it's a paradigm shift that happened because of people adapting to, e-banking, e-commerce, so on and so forth. So here we basically take only 3 steps. We take information based on where is this person coming on from. If not even video call KYC, all he has to do is just take a picture, probably 2 profile pictures and 1 straight faced picture, which is his, and then it takes about another 5 minutes to just finish the process. So it's as easy as that gets. While we started with no KYC onboarding, everybody will catch up to it soon, but this is where we kind of came in as, brought in the differentiator into the ecosystem. So pandemic or pre-pandemic, we were purpose built to do so. Okay.
Thank you. Guys, we are almost out of time and our next guest is waiting to start their panel. I would like to thank you for joining us, but there is a lot of questions on the Q&A chat, specifically from the Philippines, and also some tech and personalization questions. If you guys don't mind staying back for 5-10 minutes in the background and answering a few. There's quite a few questions around e-commerce. Khalid, there's another question specifically asked for you by Maria Firani. But thanks a lot for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure to understand more about digital banking and transformation journeys that you've contributed to for your organization. But please stay back in the background if you can answer a few questions. Thank you so much for joining in today.